Hello, my friends, and welcome to Baldur's Gate 3 character building tips. Hope you're all doing well. Today, I'm trying something a little bit different. Rather than taking a character build from level 1 to 12, I'm going to talk about a general principle that you can use to make better characters when you go to build characters yourself. Today, we're talking about character level breakpoints. The idea behind this series is pretty simple. I figure people like my character build videos, so I can teach you the principles that I use to come up with and create those builds, and then you... Hang on. Wait, maybe I didn't think this through. Uh-oh. Oh no. Well, too late now. Okay. Let's talk about character building breakpoints. So, what are level breakpoints for a character? A level breakpoint is when a class comes into its own, i.e., gets the thing that makes that class that class. They're common exit points if you're multiclassing between that class and another class, and they usually involve radical changes to the way the character plays. This video actually shares a concept with one of my most popular League of Legends videos from more than a decade ago, back when I did League of Legends videos, because this principle applies not only to Dungeons & Dragons or games with multiclassing mechanics, but to pretty much every strategy game out there. When you're building a character or a strategy or a deck of cards or constructing some form of strategy or tactic, it's going to have points when it's weak and points when it's strong. What you want to do is identify the points where it becomes strong, power spikes, but also the points where it becomes completely different in how it plays and how it interacts with the game that you're playing, and make use of those points to maximize the power of your party. In this case, you will want, for example, characters that come online at different levels and get their game-changing abilities at different levels to make sure you're always hitting a power spike across the entire game, so you never have levels where your whole party is particularly weak. And when you're choosing classes to multiclass together, you want to choose classes who have level breakpoints at levels that add up to 12, so that you can have your characters all hit the classes that your characters are using all hit their power points at the same time, and make sure that you hit all of them without having dead levels. To give you a quick example, the one that I use frequently is Rogue, which packs almost all of its power budget into its subclass abilities. When you're building an assassin rogue, the thing that you get from it is just the critical hit on surprised enemies and the extra action and initiative on the first turn of combat. Rogue more or less doesn't get anything else at other levels of the class. That's the thing that makes rogues rogues. And so you will very often see character builds stop at 3 levels of rogue because they want to get to that point to get the thing that makes a rogue into a rogue, but they don't, once they have that feature, they don't need to continue taking those levels because they can go grab a feature from another class. Every class and every character has these level breakpoints, and it's important to recognize where they show up so that you can appropriately plan your party and your builds. That's why when you see my character builds, you're going to see levels in the same increments show up over and over again. You'll see 2 levels of fighter, or 3 levels of rogue, or 1 level of cleric show up in many, many different builds, because they have important breakpoints at those levels that make those excellent levels to strive to attain when you're trying to plan out your build. Let's talk some concrete examples. So, obviously, everyone is going to want to know, what are the character level breakpoints? And so, first off, every class, all 12 classes, share 3 breakpoints. These are 4, 8, and 12, when you get access to new feats. It's always reasonable to leave a class, a multiclass, out of a class at these levels, and many builds are going to want to plan to, say, have 4 levels of one class and 8 levels of another class to ensure that they're hitting these breakpoints and getting access to the full 3 feats that most characters are able to get. One corollary to this is that characters and classes that have odd-numbered breakpoints will often have some tension because it means that they want to take an odd number of levels, but that will mean missing out on 1 or more feats because you're not hitting your 4, 8, and 12, or 4, 8, or 12 breakpoints if you take an odd number of levels. That's why you'll often see a rogue build stretch out for the 4th level of rogue to ensure that you get your feat, even though rogue as a class inherently only has a breakpoint at level 3. This also adds another inherent challenge to multiclassing because there's another important shared breakpoint across every martial class, which is level 5 when you get access to extra attack. You'll notice that 5 does not divide nicely into 12 alongside 4, 8, or 12, and so this creates some tension when you're trying to build a martial character to get access to extra attack while still hitting your level 4, 8, or 12 breakpoints in order to get access to feats. It's even more pronounced for spellcasters who have natural breakpoints at every odd level when they get access to new spell levels. It can often make a lot of sense for your characters to leave their spellcasting class once they've gotten access to the spell that you need. Let's say you have a build that revolves around getting access to haste. Well, you only need 5 levels of sorcerer to get access to haste, but if you do take that odd level, then you are stuck taking 7 levels of something else, which will mean that you are not hitting your even breakpoints of 4, 8, or 12. So when you are planning your build, you're going to have to plan around those competing interests between the odd level breakpoints and the natural even level breakpoints for every class. So how can we actually use this to improve our character builds and have practical effects in game? Well, here's some general principles about what it means to have a character level breakpoint and how you should be trying to think about your breakpoints when you're designing your party. Generally speaking, the later the breakpoint comes in a class, the stronger the individual breakpoint is. This makes perfect sense, right? You should get more out of hitting level 11 in a class than you should out of hitting level 1 in a class. But it means that will come at the cost of hitting fewer power spikes over the course of the run. If you have a bunch of 1-level dips into classes that get strong breakpoints at 1 level, right? Like if you took Cleric and Sorcerer and 2 levels of Fighter, stuff like that, you would hit a bunch of mini power spikes with that build over the course of the character build, giving you a reasonably smooth path that was always gaining in power. On the other hand, if you hold out until fighter level 11, you get a huge power spike at level 11 when you get your 3rd attack. So you should be thinking about whether you want more smaller breakpoints during a build or greater but fewer breakpoints that come at the end of a build, and that will determine whether you want that character to stay in one class for a long time, or whether you want that character to multi-class more aggressively to go after these smaller breakpoints. Of course, there's going to be some additional effects of the synergy between different character abilities, which can create multi-classing breakpoints as well. And so some builds are going to come online later on because they don't hit their breakpoint until they get the small breakpoint of 2 classes. One example of this is a Gloomstalker Ranger Rogue Assassin Rogue multiclass, which really needs both the Gloomstalker Ranger effect and the Assassin Rogue effect to do what that class is meant to do: fire multiple guaranteed critical hits in the opening round of combat, but also gets the small breakpoints of hitting Assassin Rogue at level 3 and so on. You should try, when you're building your party, to vary your power spikes. So what that means is you want your characters in your character builds to hit breakpoints at different times. If all your characters have breakpoints at the same time, then that means that there are probably dead levels where you're not significantly increasing in power. One example of this is that just the standard party has a huge power spike at level 5. Remember that I said that marshals all have a character breakpoint at level 5. Spellcasters all get a major breakpoint at odd levels. The highest of these is level 5 when they get access to 3rd level spells. So your normal party that's all single class characters is going to have a huge power spike at level 5. That's why a lot of people say this game is by far the hardest from levels 1 to 4, and they're mostly right, because the party is going to get a massive boost in power at level 5. One thing that you want to do when you're structuring your party is have maybe a character that comes online a little before that, so that you can smooth out the difficulty curve of the game, and not have huge power deficits go before you hit level 5, or dead zones from level 5 to 8, which is another pretty common problem, especially with mostly single-class characters. In order to determine these, you should look for what makes a character that character. Like, paladins aren't really paladins until they get smites at level 2. And you should look for unique new play patterns and synergies between those that create play patterns. One example of this is like warlocks get darkness plus eldritch blast plus devil sight at level 3, and that's a unique play pattern for the warlock, giving you something that you can add that combo to any build, the Darkness plus Devil Sight combo at level 3, giving you a major power spike for those builds. And Warlocks therefore have pretty strong breakpoints at level 2 and 3 when they get Devil Sight or when they get Devil Sight and Darkness, giving you a reasonable mix that you can add into just about any party that will, or any other build that wants 3 levels of something. If you have a build that's sort of structured to have its level spike at level 9, then 3 levels of Warlock is a pretty reasonable consideration because it adds another unique play pattern to that build. So let's talk about what they are for each character class. I figure it wouldn't be right of me to go through this without just giving you a bunch of examples. This is not going to be an exhaustive list of the breakpoints for every character. Obviously, there are builds that are going to multi-class out at different levels and stuff like this, but this will give you a good general grounding in common breakpoints and common level splits that you're going to want to consider. So let's talk about what these breakpoints actually are for each class. We'll start with the 3 main martial characters, Fighter, Barbarian, and Paladin. One thing you're going to notice immediately is that Fighter has tons of small power breakpoints. This is because Fighter actually gets major increases to its power level at almost every level of the class, and which is why Fighter is one of the ultimate multi-classing characters. You can mix pretty much any number of Fighter levels into any build and get a solid benefit out of it, which is why you see Fighter as the last couple levels of a build thrown on in so many cases. Another thing you'll notice is that some of these numbers line up very well. For example, Fighter 3 and Paladin 9 is a very solid build right off the bat because it lines up those breakpoints together, or Fighter 4, Barbarian 8. Remember that there are breakpoints, hidden breakpoints here at level 4 and 8 that are shared by every class, and because that build will get you a major power spike at almost every level of the build, all the way from level 1 to level 12, since you'll be getting power spikes at 1, 2, 3, and 4 from Fighter, and then again at 2 from Barbarian, 2, 5, 7, and 8 from Barbarian, you're going to be getting major power boosts at just about every level as you level up that character combination. I'll talk a little bit about what each of these power spikes are as well. So for Fighter, at level 1, you get access to a bunch of proficiencies and Constitution saving throws. That's enough for a lot of builds. You get proficiency in every weapon and armor in the game. You get a fighting style, which is a pretty nice boost to every martial character, but also to casters. Defense fighting style is really good. You also get Constitution save proficiency if you take it as your first level, which is incredibly potent for casters to maintain concentration on their spells. I've put a little exclamation mark on Fighter level 2 because this is the single best 2-level dip in the game, because it gets you access to the single best ability in the game, Action Surge. I've talked extensively about why Action Surge is so good, but a whole extra turn at every short rest is ludicrously powerful, and that's why Fighter 2 is one of the most common dips for every build. Fighter level 3, of course, you get access to your subclasses, and in particular, Battlemaster Fighter gives you a huge array of bonuses for this character, gets you access to a bunch of CC, and almost doubles your damage at early levels, and also scales extremely well on into the late game. At level 5, of course, you get extra attack. At level 6, you get an extra feat. And if you stay in Fighter all the way to 11, you get access to one of the other most powerful abilities in the game, the Fighter Extra Attack. Fighters also get Indomitable Will at level 9, but I think it's rare that you want to go 9 Fighter and not go all the way to 11, so we're just going to ignore that. But the really important part about Fighters is getting the extra attack. So Fighters give you a huge amount of optionality all the way through, and that's why they're also just one of the best single-classed character builds in the game, because they get these very common, very consistent power spikes all the way through. You're going to notice a glitch in the matrix here because I messed up my copy pasting for Barbarian. But Barbarian gets power spikes at level 2 when you get access to Reckless Attack, at level 3 when you get your subclass feature, which for many characters is incredibly powerful. Of course, you get the shared level 5 breakpoint of all martials when you get extra attack. I've put 6 with an asterisk because this is only really for the animal aspect barbarians that the Wildheart Barbarians that get their second animal aspect at level 6. There's a number of builds that get huge power spikes at this level. And then at level 7, you get one of the most underrated abilities in the game, Feral Instinct, which gives you a huge initiative boost and a immunity to becoming surprised. This is 3/5 of the Alert feat, which is in and of itself the most powerful feat in the game, and so getting access to that as a class feature is ridiculously powerful. Barbarian has a less smooth ride than Fighter all the way through, but continues to get large power spikes as it goes on. Paladin has many fewer power spikes, but has a huge one at level 2 when you get access to smites. This is why you'll see a lot of Paladin builds go only for 2 levels of Paladin or all the way to 9 levels of Paladin when you get access to your level 3 spells. Because smites are what make Paladin Paladin. At level 1, Paladins don't really do the thing that they're supposed to do, and Paladin subclasses actually don't get a lot of the power budget because so much of the power budget of Paladins is tied up in their ability to use smites. So most Paladin builds are either going to stop at level 2 Paladin or go all the way to level 9 Paladin in order to make use of their 2 major power spikes when they get 3rd level spells, particularly for Vengeance Paladins that includes Haste, or just at level 2 they get access to smite attacks. Let's talk next about the sort of off-martials, Ranger, Rogue, and Monk. These characters, you'll notice, have many fewer power spikes, and they come earlier, although Monk also has a caveat to that, which I'll talk about when I get to that point. One thing you'll notice here is I've listed Rogue as having only a single character breakpoint, and that is at character level 3, because there's basically no reason to put levels in Rogue in this game unless you are putting exactly 3 levels into Rogue, no more, no less. You can go up to 4 levels to get your feat, but Rogue gets only very minor increases to their power level as you continue past level 4. And so almost every build that involves Rogue is going to want to stop at level 3 or 4. You also don't really get much out of Rogue until level 3 because so much of the power budget of Rogue is in their class abilities, the offhand attack from Thief or the guaranteed critical and extra action from Assassin, that you basically are in it for the subclass, not for the class when you're playing Rogue. Ranger, of course, and Monk both share the level 5 extra attack boost, but Ranger also has a significant power spike at level 2 when you get a fighting style, and at level 3 when you get your subclass. There's a couple builds that are going to want to dip into Ranger for 2 levels just for the fighting style and Hunter's Mark, so I put that in there, but that's not a major power spike, so you could easily say that Ranger is only at 3 or 5 as well. But many builds are going to want to dip a little further into Ranger just because you continue to get feats if you go up to level 8 Ranger. That being said, once you've hit 5 levels in Ranger, you've again gotten almost everything that makes the class do what it does, and you will be better served by going backwards and taking 7 levels of one of the characters that has a strong 7-level breakpoint, or a mix and match of the two. Something that you'll see very often is a Fighter 4 for the Fighter breakpoint, Ranger 5, Rogue 4, giving you, or Rogue 3, excuse me, giving you the breakpoints of all 3 of those classes, and that's where you're going to end up on if you're trying to build most Archer builds in this game. Monk is very interesting because while it technically has breakpoints at 5 and 6, these are very minor ones, and mostly with Monk you're either on a 1-level dip or you're in it the whole way through. Level 6 is a good Monk split if you are intending to split, and usually that's going to be alongside Fighter, as another class that has a strong breakpoint at level 6. And of course, every character can benefit from getting Stunning Strike and extra attack, but most of the time, if you're dipping Monk at all, if you're multiclassing your Monk at all, you're going to stop at level 1 when you get Unarmored Defense and Flurry of Blows. These are the effects that make a monk, and so if you are trying to use that ability, that's actually all that you need in order to do most of the monk things that make monks good. Though of course you can continue all the way to level 12 in monk, where they have their strongest breakpoint, because monk is mostly a single class. Its abilities tend not to play too well with other classes, which is why you're going to see it either stop at 1 or go all the way to 12 most of the time. One thing that you might consider when you are looking at the spellcasters, which we're going to look at next, is that they get breakpoints at every odd level. And so you might think, well, these characters get very frequent breakpoints, so you can exit at pretty much any odd level. That's true, but remember that each breakpoint is stronger than the one prior, and so while these that I've listed here are common exit points, most spellcasters benefit from staying in one class all the way up until level 11 or 12, because they continually get strong breakpoints. Every second level you get a breakpoint, and each of those breakpoints is guaranteed to be better than the one before, because you're getting access to a higher tier of spells. That said, here's a couple other power spikes that you are going to be getting from your from these characters. So for Bard, level 3, when you get access to the subclasses, is a very common one. College of Lore Bard in particular doesn't necessarily need to go too much further into Bard in order to benefit very strongly from the Bard's abilities. Level 6, specifically for Swords Bard, where you get extra attack. Level 7, because that gets you the Bard's best spells. Bards actually don't get great spells at level 5 or 11, though they do get the magical... Bards actually mostly don't get great level 5 or level 6 spells in this game, though they do get excellent magical secrets at 10th level Bard, but you can stop at Bard level 7 and have most of the best Bard features already, access to all of the best Bard spells, and if you mix those in with another casting class, you can upcast the Bard's best spells, getting all the power of the Bard spell list without having to take some of the later spells that are somewhat underwhelming. And of course, Bard level 10 is extremely powerful because you get magical secrets, letting you take a mix of spells that is otherwise unavailable in the game and is extremely potent. Warlocks have a number of other power spikes, so level 2 gets you Devil Sight, and that's what you're in it. If you're only taking 2 levels of Warlock, it's because you have some kind of darkness abusing build in mind, and so you're going to be getting darkness from another source in that case, and using Devil Sight. You also get Eldritch Blast and Agonizing Blast, so that plays very well with any other charisma-based character, like, for example, 10 levels of Bard, which is a pretty common breakpoint. You can do Bard 10, Warlock 2, and get access to darkness from some, like, say, a racial ability by being a drow or some other way, or taking it with your magical secrets ability and become an Eldritch Blasting Bard using those breakpoints. At level 3, you get your subclasses, which are reasonable, although not ludicrously powerful for Warlock. The most common one here is if you're taking Pact of the Blade in order to use your charisma for damage, but for weapon damage, and then mixing that in with Paladin or something, then you might stop at level 3. On Tactician or below, I should also mention that level 5 Pact of the Blade gets an extra attack that stacks with other sources of extra attack, so that's a very common breakpoint, level 5, which I forgot to write down here, sorry about that. That is important to recognize for Warlock. And then at level 9, for a similar reason to Bard, Warlock's best spells have all happened by level 9. They don't get 6th level spells, and so you can get the 5th level spell access and then take 3 levels in another class. And so most Warlock builds you're going to see are going to stop at level 9 and take 3 levels of something else, because they don't really get many benefits from continuing in Warlock past level 9. Druid is probably the single class that most just wants to stay one class the whole way through. There's a breakpoint at level 10 when you hit your 3rd wild shape attack. If you're planning to be mostly martial, you could mix in 2 levels of something else. And at level 11, where if you want to be an armored druid, you could take a level of fighter or a level of cleric to get weapon and armor proficiencies without losing the effectiveness of druids. But for the most part, if you're playing a druid, you're a druid all the way. Remember that you still get power spikes at every odd level, but there's not really much point in exiting the druid class because you're going to continue to increase your power as you level up. Druids in this game also have some of the best access to 5th and some of the best power spikes at level 5 and level 6 spells. They get some of the best ones in the game in the form of more powerful summons and Wall of Thorns and stuff like that, and so it really behooves you to stay in druid the whole way through. Then there's the 1-level dip classes, Cleric, Wizard, and Sorcerer, which basically with these classes, you're pretty much going to take them through either 1 level or 11 levels. There's almost no reason to take 12 levels of most of these because they only need 2 feats for the most part, just to max out their ability scores, and so often you're going to be better off getting proficiencies or something else, although Cleric level 12 for an additional feat is totally reasonable. But for these characters, your power spikes come so readily and so quickly that either you are going to just take them all the way through to maximize your spell access and get power spikes at every single odd level all the way through the game, or you are going to stop at level 1. Level 1 Cleric is the single best dip in the game. It's the best 1-level dip class by far, because Cleric gets you all the proficiencies if you take the right Cleric subclass, and unlike other classes, like unlike a 1-level fighter dip, you don't have to take the 1-level Cleric dip at level 1 in order to get all your weapon and armor proficiencies, because they're granted by the subclass rather than the class. You also get the ridiculously powerful subclass abilities of Cleric all front-loaded. Most characters have to wait until their 3rd level in order to get their subclass abilities. Clerics get those all at once right when they start the character, so their abilities are all very, very front-loaded. There is one build that will stop at Cleric level 2 for the Lightning build, but for the most part, you get everything you want from Cleric either from 1 level or from 11 levels of Cleric to reach 6-level spells. Wizard has a 1-level dip with an asterisk because it only works based on an exploit or an odd interpretation of the rules by Larian, in that wizards are able to learn spells off of scrolls based on their caster level rather than their wizard level in Baldur's Gate 3. Not how it works in tabletop under most DMs, but how it works in this game is if you have, say, 11 levels of Cleric and 1 level of Wizard, you can learn 6th-level Wizard spells from scrolls, making Wizard the sort of factual best 1-level dip in the game, but kind of by a technicality because it's a little bit of an exploit. And of course the other Wizard dip that you are going to consider is going to 11 to get full levels of Wizard casting. Sorcerer is another class that has a hugely powerful 1-level dip because, again, Sorcerer's abilities are super front-loaded. They get their subclass selection right on level 1, of course, and you'll notice that's a theme with the characters that have these front-loaded abilities. And you only need 1 level of Sorcerer to get access to a lot of the things that make spellcasters good at early levels. Shield, for example, is one of the best things that you can splash into any build. It's the single best defensive reaction in the game, and so getting just access to shield from 1 level of a character is really powerful. The Tempest Sorcerer gives you flying whenever you cast a spell, and so 1 level of Tempest Sorcerer vastly improves the power level and versatility of just about every other spellcasting class in the game. It's also very good for marshals because it gives you the shield spell, as well as a bunch of other spells. One thing I didn't mention about 1 level of Cleric, too, is that it gives you Guidance, which is the best cantrip in the game, and Bless, which is one of the best things to concentrate on, so that's just a ton of additional power from only 1 level of Cleric. Sorcerer has some very similar effects, because it gives you a really great reaction, it gives you a bunch of utility in the form of Fog Cloud and Magic Missile and so on, and it also gives you the flying ability from Tempest Sorcerer. Level 9 Sorcerer is another reasonable breakpoint because you don't always need to hit 6th level spells with Sorcerer, but mostly if you are going in Sorcerer up past level 1, you're just going to take Sorcerer all the way through. I put level 9 here because there's some pretty common splits with 3 levels of Bard or 3 levels of Warlock that are definitely worth mentioning because 5th level spells are very powerful for the arcane spell list. 6th level spells in Baldur's Gate are very good for wizards and sorcerers, but less powerful overall than they are for clerics and druids, because so much of what you can do with 6th level spells on wizards and sorcerers you can do just by upcasting a lower level spell. A lot of your damaging spells and so on are better just spending that 6th level slot on something else, whereas a cleric or druid can really benefit from Hero's Feast in particular, something that you have to use a 6th level spell on. Or the powerful summons that they get at later levels as well. Alright, my friends, this has been character level breakpoints. I hope that you enjoyed this. If you like this kind of video and want to see more of it, do definitely let me know. This is an experiment, so only if people enjoy it will I keep doing it. And if you hated this video and don't want to see more of it, let me know that too. I really appreciate when people give feedback, both positive and negative. And as always, my friends, if you have liked the video or find this content helpful, do feel free, of course, to hit like, leave a comment, and subscribe to my channel for more of this and other strategy game content. And I will catch you next time. Cheers, my friends. GG.